Tonight, you will hear 3 terrifying, true, horror stories about hidden basements, abandoned houses, and the horrifying things that should never be disturbed. From mysterious knocking beneath old wooden floors, to cursed underground rooms in Japan, to a family trapped forever beneath their home, these stories will pull you into a nightmare you may never forget. If you hear something knocking under your floor tonight, don't answer. Story 1. The House on the Hill and the Knocking Beneath the Floor. I heard this story from a man named Hung, who once worked as a freelance electrician and plumber on the outskirts of Dalat. He said that in his life, he had repaired countless old houses, abandoned homes, decaying French villas, but there was only one house that made him quit his job for almost half a year. That house stood on a narrow slope, hidden behind a row of old pine trees. The owner was a woman in her 50s, who had recently bought it to renovate into a homestay. She said the first floor was damp, the electricity flickered, and the water in the kitchen was weak. But the strange thing was that from the very first phone call, she warned him, "Fix whatever you need to fix, but don't go down into the basement." Hung thought she was afraid because the house was old and dangerous. He only laughed and said that if the water system or the main circuit breaker was located in the basement, how could he repair anything without going down there? The woman was silent for a few seconds, then said, "Then just come and take a look. But if you hear knocking beneath the floor, don't answer." The next afternoon, Hung arrived at the house. That day in Dalat, the morning mist lingered until noon. The house had 2 floors, with old yellow walls covered in stains, and faded green wooden windows. Wild grass grew thickly around the yard. As soon as he stepped inside, the smell of damp mold and rotting wood rushed up at once. The owner led him through the kitchen, the living room, and the bathroom. Everything was old, but not too terrible. Only the wooden floor in the living room made a very strange creaking sound, as if there was a large hollow space underneath. Hung asked, "Where's the basement?" The woman pointed toward the end of the hallway. There was a low black painted door, right beside the staircase leading to the second floor. A large rusty lock hung on it. But what caught Hung's attention was that the edges of the door had been sealed with many old layers of tape, as if someone had once tried to block every crack. "Where's the key?" "I don't have it." "If you don't have it, who does?" The previous owner said it was lost. After saying that, she quickly turned away. Hung began checking the electrical lines. Near dusk, he discovered that the main power cable ran beneath the living room floor, then disappeared in the direction of the basement. That meant if he wanted to fix the problem properly, he had to open the basement. He called the owner, but she had already left at some point, only leaving a message saying she had urgent business and would return tomorrow. Hung was alone in the house. Around 6 in the evening, it began to drizzle. Hung was sitting in the living room writing down a list of materials when he heard a knock. Talk. It was very soft, coming from beneath the floor. He looked up. Talk, talk? This time it was clearer. It was not the sound of rain, nor the sound of cracking wood. It sounded exactly like someone using their knuckle to knock upward from underneath. Hung stood up and shone his flashlight down at the floor. There was nothing, but just as he bent down, the knocking sounded again right beneath his feet. Talk, talk, talk. 3 even knocks. He remembered the warning, if you hear knocking beneath the floor, don't answer. But his professional reflex made him blurt out, "Who's there?" Immediately, the house felt completely silent. There was no sound of rain, no sound of wind, even the sound of the pine trees outside vanished. Then from beneath the floor, a very small child's voice came up. "Uncle, open the door for me." A chill ran down Hung's spine. That voice did not come from the room next door. It echoed up from beneath the floor, distorted, as if blocked by earth and wood. Hung backed toward the front door, but the lights in the house suddenly went out. In the darkness, the knocking began to echo all around the room. Talk, talk, talk. Talk, talk, talk. Talk, talk, talk. It no longer came from one spot beneath his feet. It came from all sides. Under the chair, under the table, beneath the wall near the fireplace. As if under the entire house, there were many people lying face up and knocking against the floor. Hung turned on his phone flashlight. The weak light swept across the room. At the end of the hallway, the basement door was slightly open. He remembered very clearly that in the afternoon, the lock was still hanging on the door. Now the lock was lying on the ground. The black door was opened by a small crack, and from inside came the smell of blood and wet earth. Hung tried to run outside, but the front door would not open. The handle turned in circles, but the latch did not move. The knocking beneath the floor grew faster and faster. Then the child's voice sounded again. "You answered, so you have to come down." Whether because of panic or because something was leading him, Hung held his flashlight and walked toward the end of the hallway. With every step, the wooden floor beneath him trembled slightly, as if someone was crawling right underneath. He pushed open the basement door. The staircase leading down was very narrow, made of old cement. The air was icy cold. His flashlight shone downward, but he could only see a thick darkness. On the walls were long scratch marks, crossing over one another. When he reached the 7th step, he heard breathing. It was not his own. It was right behind him. Hung spun around. No one was there. But on the stair above him, there was a clear small handprint covered in mud. Then a second one. A third one. As if an invisible child was crawling down after him. Hung screamed and rushed back up the stairs. As he ran past the basement door, he heard a woman sobbing from below. "Don't leave my child behind." He did not dare look down. He kicked the front door hard until the latch broke, then ran straight into the yard, letting the rain hit his face. The next morning, the owner returned with 2 other workers. They found Hung sitting in front of the gate, soaked through, his eyes bloodshot. He kept repeating, "There are people down there. There are children down there." The police were called. They broke open the basement door. There were no living people below. But in the corner of the basement, beneath the damp soil, they found 3 small skeletons. Beside them was a tin box containing several old toys, some moldy family photos, and a notebook belonging to the first owner of the house. It was said that many years earlier, the house had belonged to a married couple with 3 children. The husband disappeared. The wife later hanged herself on the 2nd floor. As for the 3 children, no one knew where they had gone until the basement was opened. After that incident, the house was sealed off. The woman who had bought it sold the land very cheaply. No one ever repaired it again. Hung said the most horrifying thing was not the skeletons. It was that after the police took everything away, he still received a phone call from an unknown number at exactly 3 in the morning. On the other end was a child's voice whispering, "Uncle, next time, don't answer." Story 2. The Last Tenant. Mai was a Vietnamese student studying in Japan, living in a small town in Nagano Prefecture. Because she wanted to save money, she rented an unusually cheap old house, located nearly 30 minutes on foot from the station. The real estate agent said the house had been empty for more than 4 years. The former owner was an old woman who had died in a nursing home, with no relatives to claim the property. Because the house was far from the center and had deteriorated, the rent was only half that of other places. Mai asked if there was any problem. The agent gave an awkward smile. "Nothing serious. The basement is just a little damp. The landlord requires that area not be used." "Why?" "The water pipes are old, so it could be dangerous." Mai did not think much of it. In Japan, old houses with basements were not common. But in cold regions, there were sometimes storage spaces beneath the floor. She only needed a place to sleep, cook, and study. If the basement was not to be used, then locking it was enough. On the first day she moved in, Mai found the house quite clean. The tatami was a little old. The sliding doors rattled, and the kitchen was small but usable. At the end of the hallway was a low wooden door leading down to the basement. On the door was a yellowed sheet of paper with Japanese writing. "Zettai ni akanaide kudasai." Please absolutely do not open. Beneath the words was a black handprint. Mai took a photo and sent it to her friend, joking that her house looked like something from a horror movie. Her friend replied, "If it's too cheap, be careful, there may be a reason." The first night, everything was normal. On the second night, Mai began hearing noises. Around nearly 2 in the morning, while she was studying in her room, a dragging sound came from beneath the floor. Very slow. like the sound of a wet sack being pulled across a concrete floor. Scrape. 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 The sound moved from the kitchen area, passed beneath the bedroom, then stopped right under where Mai was sitting. She turned off her music and held her breath. A very soft knock came from beneath the floor. Knock. Mai jumped to her feet. Knock. 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 She called the real estate agent. No one answered. She called her friend, and her friend said it might be mice or the water pipes. But Mai knew mice did not knock in that kind of rhythm. In the following nights, the sound repeated, always at around nearly 2 in the morning. First came the dragging sound, then the knocking, then came a sound that made Mai lose sleep completely. The sound of someone calling her name. Mai-san. The voice was very hoarse, coming from beneath the floor. It was not loud, but it was clear enough that she could hear every broken breath. Mai-san, come down here. Mai began asking about the house. The neighbors around her mostly avoided talking. Only an old man who sold vegetables nearby changed expression when he heard her ask. He said the house used to belong to a woman named Kyoko. She lived alone with her son, but the son suffered from severe mental illness. The neighbors often heard arguments, crying, and smashing sounds from inside the house. Then one day, the son disappeared. Kyoko said her son had gone to Tokyo to work, but from then on, every night, the neighbors heard knocking from underground. Some even heard a man groaning from the basement. Several years later, Kyoko was taken to a nursing home. Before leaving, she only told the real estate agent one thing. Don't let anyone go down into the basement. It doesn't like strangers. Mai asked who it was. The old man was silent for a long time, then said, perhaps it was her son. Perhaps it was no longer her son. That night, Mai decided to leave, but before moving out, she needed to get a suitcase from the storage area beside the basement door. When she bent down to pull the suitcase out, she noticed that the paper saying, "Do not open," on the door had been torn at one corner. The lock was no longer fastened. The door was slightly open. From the crack in the door, a foul stench rose up. Mai was about to close it, but from below came the sound of a man crying. Please. She froze. Please, I'm so cold. The voice sounded so painful that Mai forgot her fear. She wondered if a homeless person might be trapped down there. She turned on her phone flashlight and opened the door wider. The basement stairs appeared. The steps were covered in thick dust, but on the dust were handprints. Many handprints. All of them pointed upward from below. Mai called out loudly in Japanese. Is anyone down there? No one answered. She stepped down one stair. Then another. The air was as cold as inside a freezer, blowing into her face. Her phone light flickered. When she reached near the bottom of the stairs, she saw that the basement was not large, only a low concrete room. In one corner stood a large wooden cabinet locked with chains. The crying came from inside the cabinet. Save me. Mai trembled as she moved closer. The chains were rusty. The lock was so decayed that it broke after she pulled it hard. She picked up an iron rod nearby and struck it a few times. The lock fell off. The cabinet door sprang open. Inside was empty. There was no person, no corpse, nothing except an old futon, blackened by damp mold. Mai gasped and stepped backward. At that moment, the basement door above slammed shut. The entire basement sank into darkness. Her phone died even though it still had more than 50% battery. In the darkness, Mai heard breathing right beside her ear. A man's voice whispered. Mother said the door must not be opened. She screamed and rushed toward the stairs. But something grabbed her leg. A cold hand, thin as bone, tightened around her ankle. Mai fell face first onto the concrete floor. She tried to crawl, her fingernails scratching against the stairs. Behind her, the dragging sound echoed. Scrape. 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 This time, she was the thing being dragged. In her panic, Mai kicked hard. The hand let go. She crawled up the stairs, pounding on the door again and again, crying and calling for help. She did not know how long it took before the door burst open. The old vegetable seller was standing outside with 2 police officers. It turned out that earlier, Mai had texted her friend saying she heard someone under the basement. Her friend had become worried and called the local police. When the police checked the basement, they found no one, but inside the wooden cabinet, behind the old futon, they found deep scratch marks on the inside of the wood. So many marks, as if someone had once been locked inside and tried to escape. Later, the police reviewed the records. Kyoko's son had never registered as leaving the town. There was also no record of him working in Tokyo. The house was left empty once again. Mai moved out the very next morning. She never returned to retrieve the belongings she had left behind. But 3 weeks later, she received an envelope with no sender written on it. Inside was the old sheet of paper that had once been stuck to the basement door. The line, "Please absolutely do not open," had been crossed out. Beneath it was a new line, written in trembling handwriting. Tsugiwa anata ga tojikomerubun. Next time, it will be your turn to be locked inside. Story 3. The Meal Beneath the Basement. In a coastal village in central Vietnam, there was an old 3-compartment house that once belonged to the Tran family. The people around there called it, the house with the meal underground. This story was retold by Nam, the grandson of someone who once lived next to that house. Nam did not believe in ghosts or spirits. He had studied construction and worked with drawings, concrete, and structures, but after one time when he and a group of friends entered that house to film an exploration video, he said there were things that did not exist in any blueprint. The house had been abandoned for more than 20 years. Part of the tiled roof had collapsed. The yard was full of dry leaves, and the well behind the house had been covered with a concrete slab. The strange thing was that in the middle of the house there was a very thick ironwood basement hatch. On top of the hatch was a small altar, with no photo, only an incense bowl and 3 upside-down cups. The villagers said that in the past, the Tran family had been very rich. The head of the household traded wood. His wife died early, and he lived with his 2 sons and youngest daughter. After a great storm, the whole family disappeared. No one saw them leave the village. No one found their bodies. There was only one strange thing. From that day on, every full moon night, anyone passing by the house could smell hot rice, braised fish, and incense. Some people looked through the cracks of the door and saw the light of an oil lamp shining up from beneath the floor, and heard the clinking of bowls and chopsticks. As if beneath the basement, a family was still eating dinner. Nam had heard the story since childhood, so he wanted even more to verify it. One night in the 7th lunar month, he and 3 friends brought cameras, flashlights, and backup batteries to the house. They chose the exact night of the full moon. At first, everything was like an ordinary exploration shoot. The house was dark, full of spiderwebs, and smelled strongly of dampness. The sea wind blew through the broken roof tiles, creating a long howling sound. One friend named Fuck laughed. No ghosts anywhere, only mosquitoes. But when the clock showed 11:45, the smell of hot rice began to spread. No one said anything. The smell was so clear that the whole group turned to look at one another. It was not imaginary. It was the smell of freshly cooked rice, warm and fragrant, mixed with the smell of fish braised with pepper. Nam shone his light around the house. There was no kitchen, no person, only the basement hatch in the middle of the floor. The incense bowl on the altar suddenly began to smoke. No one had lit incense. The 3 upside-down cups trembled slightly, making a clinking sound. Then from beneath the basement hatch, a woman's voice called, "Set the meal, child." The whole group froze. Fuck's camera was still recording. In the video afterward, that audio was very clear. A low, sorrowful woman's voice, coming from directly beneath the floor. Another friend named Koa became so frightened that he wanted to leave. But Fuck grew excited. He said that if they could open the basement hatch, the video would surely go viral. Nam tried to stop him, saying they should not touch the altar. Fuck did not listen. He lifted the incense bowl aside. The moment the incense bowl left the basement hatch, the whole house shook. From underground came the sound of many people pulling chairs at once. Creak, creak, creak. After that came the sound of bowls and chopsticks. Clink, clink. Then the sound of chewing. Slow, wet, as if many people were sitting and eating in the darkness below. Fuck turned pale but still tried to open the basement hatch. The hatch was very heavy. It took all four of them pulling together to lift it open by a small crack. A gust of cold air blew up. It was not the smell of damp earth, but the smell of long dead bodies mixed with rotten food. Nam shone his flashlight down. Below was a brick staircase leading into a deep basement. On the walls were black stains like kitchen smoke. At the end of the basement, the faint light of an oil lamp flickered. Koa stepped back, muttering, close it now." But Fuck had already stepped down. Nam did not want to abandon his friend, so he followed, holding the secondary camera. The other two stayed above at the mouth of the basement. The stairs led down about 15 steps. The lower they went, the clearer the sound of bowls and chopsticks became. When Nam reached the bottom of the stairs, he saw an underground room larger than he had imagined. In the middle of the room was a long wooden table. On the table was a meal tray. There was a pot of white rice still steaming, a plate of braised fish, a bowl of soup, and a bowl of fish sauce. Around the table were 5 chairs. But no one was sitting there. Fuck's voice trembled. "Who just cooked this?" Nam did not answer. He saw that on the wall behind the table hung 5 ancestral photos. The faces in the photos were blurred, but he could still faintly make out a man, a woman, 2 young men, and a young girl. At that moment, the chair at the head of the table pulled itself out. Creak. Then the second chair. Creak. The third chair. Creak. 5 chairs were pulled out one by one, as if invisible people were sitting down. The bowls and chopsticks on the table lifted by themselves. The rice in the bowls sank little by little. Fuck screamed and turned to run, but the basement door above suddenly slammed shut. The voices of the 2 friends above pounding on the door and screaming their names echoed from very far away. Nam and Fuck were trapped in the basement. The flashlight began to flicker. In the unstable light, Nam saw that on the empty chairs, human shadows slowly appeared. At first, they were only vague black patches. Then they became clearer. A man whose neck tilted unnaturally. A woman with long hair covering her face. 2 young men with grayish skin. And a young girl in white sitting at the end of the table. All of them turned toward Fuck. The woman spoke. "You came home late. Sit down and eat." Fuck cried and backed against the wall. "I'm not your son." The man at the head of the table slammed his chopsticks hard onto the table. The entire basement shook. "Sit down." An empty chair slid behind Fuck by itself and struck his legs, making him fall into it. The bowl of rice in front of him filled up, white and steaming. Nam rushed forward to pull his friend up, but something grabbed his shoulder. A cold and wet hand rested on the back of Nam's neck. He heard the young girl's voice whisper, "You do not belong to this meal. Go." Immediately, the basement door above opened by a crack, letting in a strip of light. Nam did not understand why, but he knew it was the only chance. He pulled Fuck. Fuck did not move. His eyes were fixed on the bowl of rice, his mouth hanging open as if he were being forced to eat. A spoonful of rice rose by itself and was shoved into Fuck's mouth. He choked, struggled, and tears streamed down his face. Nam tried to pull his friend away from the chair, but the man at the head of the table turned his face toward him. That face no longer had eyes. There were only 2 deep black hollows. "Guests may leave, children must stay." Nam was thrown up the stairs. He crawled upward while Fuck screamed behind him, "Nam, save me." When Nam reached near the mouth of the basement, the 2 friends above pulled him out. The basement hatch slammed shut immediately after. Fuck's voice disappeared. The whole group ran out of the house and called the police. The next morning, the authorities came and opened the basement. Below, there was no meal tray, no table, no chairs, and no Fuck. There was only an empty basement, damp earth on the floor, and 5 black burn marks shaped like human figures on the wall. But when they inspected carefully, they discovered human bones beneath the layer of earth. Not just one skeleton, 5 skeletons, buried exactly beneath the place where the table Nam had seen that night had stood. The old story was uncovered again. Years earlier, the Tran family had not left at all. On a stormy night, the basement door collapsed shut while the whole family was taking shelter below. No one outside knew. They slowly died down there, beside their final meal that they had not yet finished eating. And what about Fuck? No one ever found him. But 3 months later, Fuck's mother received a video sent from her son's own phone number. The video was 17 seconds long. The frame was pitch black, with only the faint flicker of an oil lamp. In the center of the screen was a steaming meal tray. There were 6 bowls. A woman's voice rang out. "Set the meal, child." Then the camera slowly turned. Fuck was sitting in the last chair, his face deathly pale, his eyes vacant. He looked straight into the lens and whispered, "Never go into the basement of this house." Then the screen went black.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.